Hey YouTube, Dusty here, and I'm excited to announce I have officially launched my Patreon page. If you like what I do, you can sign up for tiers like Saiyan, Super Saiyan, and Super Saiyan Rose to unlock exclusive daily content. You can also unlock unique callers for my new Discord channel. Regardless if you become a Patreon or not, make sure you stop by and say hello. Hello YouTube, how's it going? And welcome back to Kitchen Table Meta. Now, I want to do a quick little video about the draft box leaders that got spoiled. These leaders are all really cool. I'm super excited to do this video. I wanted to do it a little bit earlier, but I had to do a bunch of stuff this weekend with events. I'm trying to get ready for the regionals as well, and so I just got a little bit behind. But here it is, and I definitely cannot wait to talk to you about it. Now, if you guys are a Patreon, or if you're interested in being a Patreon, I did put a Patreon article up. It's for all Saiyan backers, and I built a deck for all of these leaders. So if you're interested in kind of like what these leaders can do, maybe get a list to see, start maybe brainstorming, start brewing. I do have a list for every one of these leaders on my Patreon page. Now, again, that card should come up here somewhere. That way, if you guys click that, you can go straight to my Patreon page. All right, so let's get into this. First up, we have the red leader, which is Vegeta. Now, Vegeta has active main once per turn. Place one card from your hand in the drop area. This card gains plus 5,000 in critical. When this card attacks, inflicts damage to your opponent's life, they place that many cards in their opponent's drop area instead of their hand for the duration of the turn. He also awakens at 4, draw 2 cards. And so essentially, Vegeta is very similar to his blue version, except he takes a card from his hand, puts it in his drop area, and then he gets plus 5,000 power and critical instead of taking a card from his life. Now, in my opinion, this is a better version of Vegeta, which is insane to me. Now, he doesn't have the self-awakening properties that Vegeta has, which is why I think they're both pretty close. But the plus 5,000 power means that he doesn't really have to awaken. And what I mean by that is, the big part of awakening for, Vegeta is that essentially he pressures your opponent with his 15,000 side. Now, since if your opponent quick awakens, so if you're playing against a Ginyu or another Vegeta and they awaken really quick, you can still pressure them by discarding a card every time, and you have more life than them, and so you have a potential to run a lot of cards out of their hand. You have a potential to essentially even the odds as far as that goes. So this is just a more controlling version of Vegeta. I'm sorry, a more aggressive version of Vegeta instead of the more versatile version of the old Vegeta. Now, something that's really cool about this version, he really plays into Red's, wanting to have few cards in hand, which is so neat because there's a lot of cards like Super Saiyan Ghost Attack Gotenks or whatever. We have cards like the Gohan that all reward you for having less cards in hand, and this card is a perfect way to turn those cards on. Now, if after Vegeta awakens, he turns into Vile Strike Dark Prince Vegeta. Now he gets 15,000 power and has active main once per turn. Place one card from your hand in the drop area. This card gains plus 5,000 power and critical. So he keeps the same effect on the backside, which is insane because it essentially makes him a 20,000 critical attacker when he awakens that draws you a card every time he attacks. This can put tons and tons of pressure on your opponent. And honestly, it's going to be a very strong, a very aggressive deck when this guy comes out. Now, the one thing I will say about this is that right now I think aggro is struggling a little bit. There's not very many good aggro leaders, and the ones that are good have to win by a certain point, or they probably just can't win. Your opponent gets too many cards, and so aggro in this game is very tough to play. It's very not good too. I mean, it's okay, but it's not the best format in my opinion, or the best archetype in my opinion. And so I think this will change once Vegeta comes out. I think he's perfect for those aggressive players that are looking for a really aggressive decks. I know, from talking to people at different events, people are very upset that aggro isn't as good as they want, and so I think this is definitely going to change with this leader. I think he's absolutely bonkers. I think that he's probably the best leader in the draft packs as well, and honestly I just think that he's really going to change up the meta when he does come out. And so for all those reasons, I want to give Vile Strike Dark Prince Vegeta 3 stars and cannot wait to play with this guy. I'm actually really excited to play with him. I'm really excited to see how he changes the meta. Okay, next up we have the blue leader, and that is going to be Son Goku, which is great because I think this game really lacks Goku leaders. I was like, what? There's only like 8 in the game. I wish it was at 9 or maybe an even 10 would be terrific. So this guy is active main once per turn. Choose one card in your life and add it to your hand. This card gains double strike for the duration of the turn. He awakens at 4 life and draws you 2 cards. Now this is essentially the polar opposite of the Vegeta, the blue Vegeta we have. It does the exact same thing he does, but instead of getting critical, you gain double strike. I don't think this Goku was going to, essentially, change the meta very much. I don't think that it's going to be, a very good leader. I think that he's probably mediocre at best. But I do think that there is some potential of a double strike deck that could, maybe come out. This Goku is essentially just a better version of the green Goku we got in set 1, and I think that decks that were really good, that good green Goku decks will just be better as a blue Goku deck, and I'm excited to see how that kind of changes stuff up. Now, once Goku awakens, he gets active main once per turn. Choose one card in your life and add it to your hand. This card gains double strike for the duration of the turn. If you have 7 or more energy, this card gains plus 5,000 power. Again, very similar to Vegeta's awakening side. The difference is that Vegeta does the exact same thing except with critical, like we talked about, except his says if you have 7 or more blue energy, you get plus 10,000. Again, this is just a more versatile version of that card. I actually kind of wish he just had that ability. I think it would make this guy very, very scary once he awakens. I still think a 20,000 double strike attacker is scary, but honestly, we have a lot of those right now. We have Vegeta that does it. We have Ginyu that does it. We just have a lot of ways to get that effect, and it's kind of boring at this point, so I kind of wish they would have had, kept that Vegeta backside as well. Now, the one thing I will say is, again, in my Patreon version, we did build a double strike deck that looks like it could be a little strong early game, and it could be, again, another one of those aggressive decks. The big problem with this, though, is that if you double strike your opponent too much and you lose momentum at all, they're just really going to kind of beat you by card advantage. Now, the good thing about this deck, though, is that about this leader is that he can awaken himself, and so he's not going to be as far behind in card advantage as some of the more aggressive leaders. And so, again, this just gives us another aggressive leader. I think that because aggression right now is a little lackluster, that this is actually a pretty good leader for aggressive decks, and for that reason I'm going to give him 2 stars. I think that he could be one of the better aggressive leaders in the game, but that's not really saying much since we only have like 2 or 3 right now anyway. But again, not the best leader from the draft packs, but still pretty strong. Next up we have the green leader, and that is Gotenks. Now, Gotenks says, when this card attacks your opponent's leader, if you have less cards in your hand than your opponent chooses 1 card in their hand and places it in the drop area. And he, again, awakens at 4. This is a pretty unique ability. This is kind of, in my opinion, a better Broly effect. And so I can imagine that this leader will probably take over most Broly decks because he can still discard cards out of your opponent's hand. You don't have to worry about like Broly's ring or anything like that. And, while there is a, something you have to do to trigger that effect by having less cards in your hand than your opponent, so you can essentially never run your opponent out of cards in hand like Broly can, unless you have no cards in hand yourself, which sounds like a pretty bad place to be in. But I still think this is an extremely powerful effect. Again, pretty good for aggressive decks as well, because they kind of take away that advantage they give you. So if they attack you, you have to discard a card, and you get hit, you draw a card back. So you're kind of just even instead of netting a card. And I can see this guy being very good, and again, decks that want to use the red cards to kind of pitch cards out of their hand so you can kind of take advantage of having like Super Saiyan Gotenks in their, or Ghost Attack Gotenks in their deck, and make you discard cards. So I think this is, again, a very versatile leader, a very strong leader, and another leader that kind of favors those aggressive decks. Now, once he awakens, he turns into Prodigious Strike Super Saiyan Gotenks. Now, I actually looked this word up because I've actually never seen this word before. And what it means is it's kind of arrogant. And it means like arrogant, which definitely is what Gotenks is, right? Whenever he transforms, he's very arrogant, very passionate, and that's essentially what this word means. Now, what happens is when this card attacks your opponent's leader, if you have less cards in your hand than your opponent, they just choose a card in their hand, they discard it. And when he attacks, you draw a card. So this is just like pure card advantage once he attacks. Now, again, I think this leader is going to be much better than Broly in the Broly type decks. The reason why is because he can put pressure on your opponent's battle cards. Now, he only gets his effect when he attacks a leader, which is very, very important. However, he can still attack battle cards, unlike Broly. And so if you get into a pinch, you need to attack, to try to clear out the field, he can do that. So again, I think this leader is going to be fantastic with cards that allow you to discard cards out of your hand. I think he's going to be a better Broly. I think that his effect is very good. I'm afraid his effect might be lackluster and maybe mirror matches and maybe other more aggressive, because again, I think this draft box leaders are actually going to make the format be a little bit more aggressive, and I think that he is going to be a lot worse against aggressive decks because it's going to be harder to get value out of having less cards in your hand when you're against those decks. So for all those reasons, I want to give him a 2-star. I think he's very good. I think he's really cool. I'm just a little worried that he might struggle in this new meta, and that his effect might be a little hard to get. But if you do get it consistently, I think this guy can very easily be a 3-star candidate if you can trigger it every single turn. Okay, and so the last leader is our yellow leader, which is Frieza. Now, Frieza has been one of the most controversial leaders out of this draft box whenever he was spoiled a lot earlier. But I do want to go over his effects. And I want to tell you guys that this guy isn't falling, and this guy isn't going to be as powerful as what I think a lot of people think he will be. Now, he has the permanent, when you activate an extra card, you may choose one card in your life and add it to your hand. If you do, reduce the energy cost of that extra card by 1 for the duration of the turn. If this reduces the energy cost of that extra card to less than 1, you may activate the card without paying the specified cost. And then again, he awakens at 4 and draws you 2 cards. Now, the big thing about this card, there's a couple things I want to cover. Number one, anytime a card in this game reduces the mana cost, or I'm sorry, the energy cost of the card, you still have to pay its specified costs. And so what I mean by that is if you have a card like Gohan, the Miraculous Comeback Gohan, and for some reason you would be able to reduce its cost down to 0. If you don't have 2 red, you can't play the card. So you still have to pay the little bubbles on the card. Now, the powerful thing that Frieza does is he gets around that so he can essentially, if you have Sensu Bean, you can take a card out of your energy, out of your life, put it in your hand, and you can actually play it for 0. You don't have to have a blue energy. You don't have to have anything to do that. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about this card being insane with Cold Bloodlust, this card being really, really good with cards like Crusher Ball, just counters in general, and I agree with that. I agree with all of that, but I think this card is going to be even stronger with cards like Sensu Bean, because it's essentially just a free, untap 2 energy, which can be very powerful in kind of rampy decks, and I feel like Frieza is a very, very versatile leader. But before I go into him more, let's flip him over, let's take a look at his awakened side. Now, he turns into Bionic Strike Mecha Frieza, and he has the same permanent ability, except he reduces the cost by 2 instead of 1. Now, I think this is maybe where the card is a little too strong. I think that compared to the other leaders, they essentially just kept their ability on both sides. And so I really wish that that's what they would have done with this guy. I think if they would have just made it so you took a life and you reduced the card by 1 on both sides, that would still be extremely, extremely powerful. But instead they made it so they reduced 2, and I think on the awakened side is where Frieza is going to be the strongest. Now, I do think the problem with Mecha Frieza, though, is that once that he does awaken, it becomes a lot harder to use his ability. You can't just use it every turn. You can't just use it every time you cast an extra ability, or you will kill yourself. Now, I think one of the biggest counters to Frieza, and why I don't think Frieza is going to be much of a threat. Well, I would say much of a threat. I think it's going to be a very strong deck. Why I don't think it's going to be broken like we think it might be right now is because I think after these leaders come out, aggro is really going to jump in popularity. I think it's going to jump in strength. And I think that one of the big weaknesses to Mecha Frieza is just an aggressive deck. If you set down across from Mecha Frieza, you just attack him every single turn. You put a lot of pressure on him, make him have to use his ability. Essentially maybe get in some free damage, Kabas, stuff like that. You're going to put him in a spot where he just can't use his ability a lot, because if he does, he's going to die. And so I think that's going to be one of the biggest counters. I think the Vegeta leader we saw, the Gotenks leader we saw, even the Double Strike Goku leader are all very good against this card. And I think it's going to be one of those formats where aggression is going to get better, and because of that, this card is not going to be as strong. Now, one thing I will say going into this, this card is very strong with Objection. This card is very strong with Sensu Bean, with Cold Bloodlust. All the good extra cards that we would play with, this card is absolutely fantastic with. Something else to remember, the last thing I'll talk about with this card, I'm sorry if I'm going too long, is you could run extra cards in your deck that you wouldn't normally play, because you can reduce the cost down to 0 and not have to play its cost. So you can play a blue-red deck and still run like the green counter, for example, or you can play a yellow-red deck and play, Sensu Bean in the deck, or Objections in the deck. And so that's something to really remember about this card. He can do stuff like that, which is pretty unique. This is a very, very unique leader, and something that I can imagine just being immediately replaced in the Tricolor Ginyu decks, and instead we'll be playing the Tricolor Frieza decks. I also think there's going to be, a new tempo-type deck that will be built around this Frieza. I can see tons and tons of versatility coming down this leader, And I see this leader being, again, he can self-awaken, so he's going to be really good against hand destruction decks as well. And so just do not count this leader out. I think he is very, very strong. I'm excited to see what people do with this leader, but please do not think the sky is falling. This leader has plenty of counters, and I think he's really going to struggle against aggressive decks, which I think are got a huge boost from this draft pack. So I'm going to give Frieza 3 stars. Think he's one of the best leaders in the draft set, and think if you open up your draft box, you get this guy, you're going to be extremely excited about it. All right, guys, so that's it for this review of the spoiler cards. One thing I do want to say is a lot of people have asked me, do I think the draft box is worth it? Absolutely, I think it's worth it. It's essentially a booster box that gives you this, plus the set 1 promo. Also, for all you European viewers as well, this is the best way to buy into the game. It's something I'm going to do a video about later anyway. And so just remember, this draft box has tons of value in it. These leaders are all worth it. Every one of these leaders are good. You should have a copy of every one of them if you want to take the game competitively and take it serious. And so just, you know, again, just a very, very good product. I'm very excited to get into it. I'm excited to start drafting, bringing you guys some draft content as well. Probably after regionals, I'll start doing some content about drafting and how to, you know, do drafting, how to get into it. We actually did a sealed event as one of our events here locally, and we had a blast doing it. So I'll definitely, you know, kind of get you guys kind of up to date on drafting as well. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you again for all the love, all the support. You know, we got over 1,000 subscribers thanks to you guys. My Patreon page has been doing awesome. I think I'm up to 13 Patreons, and it's just been amazing. Thank you guys so much for the love. Thank you so much for the support, and we'll see you next time.